Okay, folks, here we are. We're going to get started with our next session, Humanizing Pre-Course Contact with the Liquid Syllabus. My name is Michelle Pacansky-Brock, and you're going to get to know me in just a few minutes. If you don't know me already, I'll be sharing an introduction with you. This session, I hope, for those of you who did attend the earlier session with Dr. Claude Steele, I'm very hopeful that you're going to see many overlaps. And if you didn't attend, it's okay. You're still going to have wonderful takeaways for the session. But that is my hope for you today, that you do see those if you did attend earlier. And I encourage you to point those connections out in the chat, actually. That's kind of a fun way that I can see that you're following along, and it helps me because we all know how weird it is to talk to a computer screen. So our agenda for today, we're going to have 4 different sections of today's session. We're going to start with a warm-up. And the topic of the warm-up is seeing white dominant culture. It will end with a personal written reflection. So I just want to set that context. There won't be breakout rooms that we're going to put you into or anything like that. I think that's important to share as we talk about any kind of interaction, just to be sure people are sure about what's ahead. And then in our lean in phase is where I'll be getting into the Liquid Syllabus presentation. I'll do some setup about what humanizing is, and then we'll get into what a Liquid Syllabus is and really start to unpack how you can think about it as an opportunity to send cues of trust and identity safety to your students before your online class even starts. In the Engage session, this will be an opportunity for you to make a choice. There'll be a hands-on session. You can stay in this Zoom room and work on your Liquid Syllabus, actually get started on one. Or we have a Zoom room that we'll be sharing, a Zoom meeting room that we'll be sharing in the chat. And if you're someone who already has a Liquid Syllabus and you want to talk to your peers, maybe share what you've done, just have a conversation, we'll give you a room where you can go do that. And then we'll reconvene in this room after the Engage section and join for our cool down, which will just be a discussion with some Q&A and reflection, and you all will be leading that. So let me share a little bit about myself. I'm your guide for this fall into Humanized Online Teaching, a Pathway to Equity series. My name is Michelle Pacansky-Brock. I started in the California Community College system 22 years ago. And I started as a part-time faculty member. I've taught full-time for many years in our system. I've also served as an administrator and a staff member in the CSU, or Cal State University system. And for the past 4 years, I've been back in the California Community College system, which I will abbreviate as CCC during today's session. I'm in a faculty support role, and I work at the state level with CVC and @ONE, who is offering the series to you here today. And I support faculty who teach online. My role is faculty mentor for online teaching and learning. I'm a first-generation equity practitioner. I share that with you to acknowledge that I am a learner. I am new in this space. I am a white, cisgendered, able-bodied female. I am a second-generation American. Both sets of my grandparents were white European immigrants who came over through Ellis Island in the early part of the 20th century. I grew up in a predominantly white middle-class suburb in San Jose, California. I reside on currently and honor with gratitude the traditional land of the Nishinan people, past and present. I'm a mom, a wife, a daughter, a sister, an auntie, a fur mama, and an educator who believes in the potential of online education to transform lives. And I want you to know that about me. I know that you have an incredibly hard job. And there's been many times where I found myself this past year and a half thinking, I can't imagine what it would be like to be in a full-time teaching role right now, or in a part-time teaching role right now. And I know many of you are part-timers and teach at more than one institution. So I want to acknowledge that. I also want to acknowledge the faculty support folks out there who have stepped up and taken on the responsibility to support so many faculty. This past year has been very, very arduous. And I just want to acknowledge that and make space for that and have you understand where I am coming into this from. So I do teach one class now, but I don't teach full time. I have a full-time job that is a faculty support role. And now that I've shared my positionality, I think it's really important for me to share that positionality, because I want you to know that I recognize that each of us is coming into this from a different position. And our goal for this series is to make progress towards becoming an equity-minded practitioner. So each session we need to keep in the context of equity. And I have a quote here from Jennifer Ortiz of LA Trade Tech College. An equity-minded practitioner commits to lifelong learning, actively participates in dismantling systems of oppression, and believes in the limitless potential of Black, Latinx, Native American, and other minoritized student groups. And so we want to be in this mindset. But I also recognize that in order to dismantle systems of oppression, we have to see them. So I want to share a little bit about my equity journey in this warm up here today. Some of you will identify with this and some of you won't. Like everything else in life, our positionality informs how we see and how we experience things. And I recognize that mine may be very similar or different from yours. And that's important because things look very different from the center than they do from the margins. As a person born into many privileges, a great deal of discrimination and prejudice, including racism, has been invisible to me. Until not long ago, in the context of my life, I struggled to see my own culture. And now today, I recognize it. And while I'm still learning and growing, I understand that the reason I could not see my culture is because I mostly see things from the center. The white culture that is dominant in the United States is the culture that I have identified with. The color of my own skin grants me the privilege of existing at that center, of being the norm as opposed to the other. When being white is the norm, one doesn't see white as an identity at all, because it is the norm against all else is compared. In the past few years, this has changed a lot for me. As I look back and recognize this, I take it as a sign of personal growth, but I also acknowledge that this equity work is a lifelong commitment and journey that will not end. And I'm inspired by many that I've learned from along the way. Today, I feel more empowered because I see the white dominant culture that has shaped my identity, my beliefs, my actions, and even my teaching. This allows me to start to talk about and dismantle it. You have to name it and see it before you can do that. And talking about it, by the way, is such an important part of that dismantling. Talking about race is uncomfortable for me. And I'm thinking about Dr. Steele's messages about stereotype threat. And I want you to know that I recognize that having to sit before you and talk about race, it really goes against the very culture, the very values of white dominant culture. And I'm challenging myself to lean into this discomfort. I'm digging deep and reminding myself that this vulnerability that I'm feeling right now, it feels like weakness, but I also know that it looks like courage. And that's something that I have learned from the research of Brené Brown, and it's something that I tell myself every day. So if you identify with my positionality, I hope to inspire you to do the same. This warm-up is an exercise in self-awareness. Each of you will take something very different away from it, depending on your positionality and where you are in your equity journey. This is about self-awareness. Self-awareness is key to inclusive teaching, which is our goal. As Brian Dewsbury and Cynthia Brame have written, to understand students' voices, we must recognize and understand our own. If we ignore this context, we fail to see how we are contributing to socially disconnected classroom environments. And that means classrooms on the ground or online. So we're engaging in this warm-up to start an inquiry. It is an opening into which I hope you'll continue to explore and work towards self-awareness on your own if you identify with a similar positionality of my own. So let's talk a little bit about culture, folks. This may be new to some of you. I know some of you teach this stuff and you could do this much better than I. Culture is often likened to the water that a fish swims in. The longer you swim in it, the more invisible it becomes. Let's define it. There are lots of definitions of culture, by the way. Culture is a way of life for a group of people, the behaviors, the beliefs, values, and symbols that they accept, generally without thinking about them, and that are passed along by communication and imitation through relationships and media consumption from one generation to the next. Culture is not the same as race. Culture is passed on through interactions with people and is both enforced and constructed through media like movies, commercials, ads, books, etc. Culture is the food a group of people eats, the music they listen to, the clothes they wear. But culture is also communication. Culture is also who is cast as the hero versus who is cast as the villain. Culture is included. Culture is who is included and who is left out. Culture is who is recognized for their efforts and who is not. It is who is at the front of the room and who is in the seats. Culture is who is given the mic and who isn't. Culture is who assumes they have a seat at the table. Even without knowing it, culture influences everything that you do. It is internalized and serves as the ambiguous and invisible force that keeps people moving in a particular direction. In the United States, white culture is the dominant culture. It doesn't mean it's the only culture, but it's the dominant culture, also referred to as white supremacy culture. Embedded in white dominant culture is the idea that white people and the ideas, thoughts, beliefs, and actions of white people are superior to people of color, and their ideas, thoughts, beliefs, and actions. When a dominant culture prevails, those with different values and beliefs can see it very clearly because the culture creates barriers around them, forcing them to fit in, to become something different, or as Claude Steele said, to assimilate, and denying them the ability to be their true authentic self, which is dehumanizing. So now, folks, this slide includes a list of some of the values of white dominant culture taken from the work of Tema Okun, Kenneth Jones, and Daniel Buford, and many other collaborators who you can read about more in the link at the bottom of the slide. And I encourage you to do that later so you can stay present with us today. So let's take a breath and mindfully consider these for a moment. I'm going to read them to you. And as I do, I want to encourage you to reflect on your teaching practices, or if you're not in a teaching role, in your work practices. As you listen, mentally take note of relationships that you identify between a particular value and your teaching or work. What does it look like? Those are the things I want you to be thinking about. So I'm going to read these to you now. Perfectionism or fear of making mistakes. Sense of urgency. Quantity over quality. Worship of the written word. Only one right way. Individualism. Either or thinking, which is things are always good, bad, hard, easy, etc. And fear of open conflict. Take a moment to recognize what's resonating with you now. And I'm going to ask you now to just take 2 minutes to take some notes and reflect on your thoughts. Okay, go ahead and wrap up your thoughts, but don't let them go because we want you to hold on to those as we move forward. So let's transition now into our lean in phase. I hope you'll leverage your takeaways from that warm up. Keep your observations in mind and address the values of white dominant culture that may emerge and push back on your efforts to do something different in your online teaching. This is hard work and it requires all of us, some more than others, to be vulnerable. And I want to acknowledge that. We are here together to learn from one another and to support one another. So the framework for today's presentation really stems from the California Community College's Vision for Success, which was originally unveiled at the state level by our chancellor in 2017. And there was recently an update shared in 2021. Along with many other system-wide goals, it targets equity. And we need to start by recognizing that Black, Hispanic, Indigenous, and other people of color are more likely to attend a community college, but less likely to succeed than their white and Asian peers. This is what we call an equity gap. This equity gap has been known face to face for a very long time. And historical data pre-COVID shows that learning online increases equity gaps, which is something we need to keep at the heart and center of our conversations. We have a system goal of reducing equity gaps by 40% by 2022 and closing those gaps by 2027. Now in 2021, the update recognized some important things, including that our students are in worse shape financially now. More students have become housing or food insecure. Students are experiencing fresh pain and trauma from racial injustice. Students' mental health is suffering. The digital divide is more clear now than ever, and some students are stepping away from their educational paths. And I'd like to say and acknowledge that all of these things could also be said about our faculty, those who are teaching. And I want to acknowledge that this is hard, and we have to acknowledge our own mental health and make space for that as a priority before we can make space for our students. That's a big topic, and I hope we'll address it through the series. And I actually intend to address that a bit in some of the warm-ups that we'll be doing in later series. So an equity-minded practitioner commits to seeing and removing barriers. And I have those things separately again, because we have to see them before we can remove them. And a lot of these barriers are more visible than others, right? Things like using open educational resources and getting rid of our textbook costs. That's one, right? Removing remediation classes, that's another. But there are barriers that are more difficult to see, and they disproportionately impact students from racially, ethnically, and other minoritized groups. And one of those barriers is deficit-based thinking about our students. I have a quote here. This is from an article that I believe dates to 2018. The title is "Weakest Students More Likely to Take Online Classes but Do Worse in Them." And this article goes on to say that the interaction between a student and an instructor is an intrinsic part of the educational process, and we need to be very, very cautious before watering down that requirement. And I want to say that I agree wholeheartedly with that quoted sentence, but call out the deficit-based thinking that is used here to refer to our students and to online classes. Too often we make the assumption that teaching online means that we can't be there for our students and we can't create connection. And that's very far from the truth. It's harder to do so often because we're starting from a place of not knowing what that looks like. And that's what good professional development can bring to you. And if we shift our thinking to an asset-based framework, asset-based thinking, we'll see things very differently. This quote embodies asset-based thinking for me, and an equity approach to thinking, an equity mindset. When a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which the it grows, not the flower. So we want to turn our attention inward to our online classes and really be critical about what's happening there. Look to the research, find out what's important that we're missing. What is it that we're not doing that we could be doing, and how do we do it? And how do we learn to do it? So uncertainty exacerbates anxiety and threat. And I want us for a moment to kind of put on these asset-based glasses, these equity-minded glasses, and we want to center our students' experiences and think about what it might have been like to be a student enrolled in 4 classes at the start of fall 2021 on your campus or your campuses, acknowledging that some of you teach at more than one college. So imagine that. And in the chat, I want you to name an uncertainty that you may have had the week before your classes began. Where am I supposed to go? Thank you, Valerie. How do I use Canvas? Would I be able to manage my course load? How do I meet my classmates? How do I pay for books? Will my teacher be kind? Will my Wi-Fi work? Can I afford books? Will it be safe? Can I manage my schedule? Do I have Zoom meetings? What do I do if I need help? Will other students work with me in groups? How can I get hold of my instructor? How do I block my time? Will I feel comfortable? What other changes are ahead? Do I have to turn on my camera? What if I can't make office hours? Can I access my class with my phone? These are all amazing. I'm going to let you keep going and encourage everyone to keep reading. Will I be allowed to turn in late work? Is there a way I can get a laptop? Will my instructor be present in this, or will this be a black hole? Yeah, and we have to remember that, those can be concerns that a student has about a single class, and then you layer the multiple classes on top of it and understand that every class is different and has different criteria and expectations, right? And so that's all things that students need to manage on top of everything else going on in their lives. One of the antidotes to this is human connection. We're talking about being in this place of threat and anxiety, which can be provoked by things like stereotype threat, as well as just life experiences. Keeping human connection at the center and remembering that at the center of that is trust is really important, because emotions, we know this from neuroscience and we know this from decades of research, emotions don't just influence cognition, emotions are the ground floor of cognition. And in higher education, we tend to kind of just forget about that, right? Antonio Damasio, a leading neuroscientist, has said, people are not thinking machines, we are feeling machines that think. A person simply must feel settled and well before they can engage in the process of making sense of information. And I want to be clear that this is not groundbreaking news. The research of scholars like Laura Rendon, Luke Wood, Frank Harris III, who are all people of color, just to name a few, who study the educational experiences of students of color and first-generation students. This research has shown for literally decades that positive student to instructor relationships, I should say educator relationships, and include counselors in that as well, and other important people who play important roles on campus. For this sake, we're focusing on instruction, is really at the center. This concept is also integral to Maslow's hierarchy of needs that emerged in the 1960s. For those of you who might be familiar with Maslow, M-A-S-L-O-W. And now we can really make the claim that the emotional dimensions of learning are rarely supported in college classes, but in higher education, we can't throw them at the door, because just because a person turns 18 and becomes an adult doesn't mean that this doesn't matter. And that's one of the things that's lacking in online classes generally. I'm generalizing here. Not supporting those affective dimensions is a barrier. So that's the barrier here that we're identifying, and we want to start to dismantle, not supporting those effective dimensions of learning. It's a barrier that prevents success for all kinds of students, but particularly for students of color, low-income students, and first-generation students. The cognitive tax that threat places on a college student is proven to derail their ability to achieve their full potential. It's what Sia Ver-Sheldon refers to as a cognitive underminer. And if you want to learn more about that, I recommend her book, Bandwidth Recovery, which is noted on the slide here. So here we are talking about humanized online teaching. This is a grassroots online teaching movement that began a long time ago. This isn't new, and many of you out there attending today have been part of it. It started well over 10 years ago in the California community colleges through our courses in @ONE, the online network of educators. More recently, the past 2 years, I've had the honor and pleasure to lead a $1.3 million grant to advanced humanizing across the California community colleges and CSU system, which stands for California State University, in STEM. And the practices that we took out of that grant, those are the 8 elements of humanized online teaching that are showcased on the slide here. This is a model that we put together through the work in that grant, and it's really going to provide the foundation of your learning here today. So I'm not going to go through all of these elements, but we're here today to focus on the first one, a liquid syllabus. I do want to point out that the elements are research-based. I like to think about them like recipes for you to follow and adapt to make your own. So think about that. They're not intended to be the right way to do things. They're intended to be implemented with warm demander pedagogy also, and you'll learn about that in a future session if you stay with us through the series. So the overarching goal of humanized online teaching is to create belonging for all students. Belonging is being accepted for your true authentic self, which overlaps greatly with our earlier session from Dr. Claude Steele. When a person does not belong, they feel forced to fit in, and that is a dehumanizing experience. When courses are designed without consideration of the vast differences of our students, they leave out many students, and they create toxic environments for them to learn in. Within the domain of threat, your brain actually goes into a very specific physiological reaction. And well, I'm not going to get into that right now. Researchers show that there are cues in our environment that trigger threat. And those cues can be categorized as macroaggressions and microaggressions. If you've taken equity, professional development, or if it's part of your practice in general, your discipline, you're very familiar with microaggressions, but they are subtle or ambiguous cues of racism that are unintentional. So the aggression occurs at the receiver's end. It might be something like saying to a Black person, wow, you're very articulate. So it sends the cue that I don't expect you to be articulate because you're Black. Now, on the other side of things, we have kindness cues that really are where we need to focus. Macro affirmations and micro affirmations. And the work of Mika Estrada, who teaches at UC San Francisco, she's a social psychologist, has found that most environments are filled with macro affirmations and microaggressions. So we see these big overarching sweeping messages where you're welcome, but then there's all this microaggression that happens at the personal level, which creates this very ambiguous experience for a human. When a person exists in an ambiguous environment, they scan their environment looking for cues of safety. So what we want to ask ourselves is, when we're online, what are those cues of safety? What are those cues of safety that students are seeing? And the most dominant cue that a human brain scans for is other humans. So we want to keep that in mind. And the work of Dr. Mika Estrada calls out for more micro affirmations. And I love that word. And that's how I think about humanizing We're creating cues, micro affirmations or kindness cues of social inclusion. So when we teach online, there, I think someone in the earlier session said something about we may not have, or maybe I said it, we may not have a start date, we may not have a first day of class, right? There may be instruction starts on this day, but that can be rather ambiguous. And that ambiguity can be problematic for someone in a place of threat. So we want to think about before the class starts as a high opportunity zone. It's when threat is high, and that's an opportunity for us when we're teaching online to actually send cues of kindness cues of social inclusion. I believe that extends well into the first week as students are getting acclimated. This is a time when we need to commit to building trust with our students. Micro affirmations are kindness cues of social inclusion, and they're like marbles in a jar of trust. For those of you familiar with Brene Brown's work, she talks about trust like a marble jar. And again, if we think about a Black student, a student of color, a student from another minoritized group who has had this context of negative experiences and is coming to our college classrooms, thinking about these negative stereotypes that are threatening their performance in your class, we need to build trust with them. That's the instructor's role. And of course, what you bring into that environment matters, right? So a Black student may see a Black professor and feel as if there's more trust established right there. A Black student may see a white professor and feel differently. So we need to think about our identities, but we matter. Instructors matter, our presence matters, and the cues that we send matter. And so we want to think about accumulating trust over time. I want to acknowledge that syllabus redesign as an equitable practice is not new. This isn't something that I'm trying to take credit for and say that this has never been thought of before. There's lots of research around this, and so I have some links on the slide for you to look at. There's also there's research that shows that a friendly syllabus increases the student's perception that their instructor is approachable, caring, and motivated. And a brief syllabus with a warm tone and a reach out statement increases a student's self-reported likeliness to reach out for mental health support. A reach out statement is simply the cue that it's okay to do this. It's okay to take care of yourself. It's a good thing to take care of yourself. And here's a resource where you can make that happen. So to define a liquid syllabus, prior to the start of a new term, a liquid syllabus sends the following kindness cues of social inclusion to students. Diversity is valued as an asset in this class. Your identity is safe here. I am a partner in your learning. You're not in this alone. And I want you to be successful. It's where we need to send these cues before a student even logs into a class. A liquid syllabus is phone friendly. It's a website that renders beautifully on a mobile device and that's public. So when a student gets an email with the link to a liquid syllabus, it opens instantly on their phone. And I want you to think about the cues that that sends right there. For a student who is having those questions, am I going to be able to use my phone? And not having to be presented with a login screen. We know nationally more community college students own a smartphone than a laptop. This varies by college, and that factors that increase smartphone ownership in the US are low income, younger, Black, and Hispanic. So a liquid syllabus, again, public web page. We like to encourage, if you've never created a website, which from my experience is most faculty, Google Sites is great. It does require you to have a free Google site or a free Google account. It's phone friendly. It's accessible. You apply accessible web design guidelines to it, which I know is a learning curve for many of you. Alt text, color contrast, headings, subheadings, and lists. And it's written with a welcoming, hopeful language. I want to really underscore this. It's not just about taking your syllabus and putting it into a website. This is a redesign process. It's about thinking about the cues that the language sends. It includes a welcome note with a brief, imperfect video with accurate captions. Whoops. It includes a week 1 success kit, a packed a teaching philosophy, inclusive images, and a support for you section. And I'm going to show you some examples. I'm going to show mine because it's most natural for me to talk about my own work, but I do have examples of others on the slide here for you to look at. I also want to encourage you right now, if you have a phone nearby, take it out and scan it with your camera. If you have a fairly recent phone, let me say that differently. Scan the code that you see on the screen with your camera. Now I have an iPhone. This is what I don't know if you can see that, but I get a pop-up at the top that says open sites.google in Safari. And if I click there, that's my Liquid syllabus. So we can use that QR code too in our classes, just like you did. If you had that there and a student's on a computer, they can open it on their phone. And I like to encourage students to add a link to their home screen so that they refer to it later in the term. So we'll talk more about that. I'm actually going to go out to mine right now and just show you around a little bit. And I hope you have it open on your side too. Let me put the link in the chat. If you didn't grab it on your phone, you can open it on your computer. I'm going to show you how to look at this. I'm going to show you right now how to create that QR code. First of all, use Google Chrome as your browser. Use Google Chrome as your browser and any web page that you're on. Look up here. Do you see that little icon? Create QR code for this page. Can you see that? Does that appear? I don't know if that's the screen sharing shows up there. Okay, so that's my QR code. So I just download it and then I can put that image in my course. I have instructions on this slide also, how to create a QR code. Okay, so if you've got my slides, you've got those instructions. So this is my Liquid syllabus. I'm going to play a little bit of this video.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Pacansky-Brock. Thanks for taking a few moments to check out our Liquid syllabus and for watching this video. I want you to know just a few about me before we get started with the class and start learning together. First of all, I am a teacher at heart. I love to teach and I really love to teach online. So I want to be sure that you know I'm here because this is something I really enjoy doing. I also want you to know that I understand it's hard to be a student, and it's especially hard now to be a student. I recognize that, and I want you to understand that I'm doing my very, very best to create a course for you that will challenge you and be sure that you learn new things, but I'm trying really hard to take all the guesswork out of it. Our course is designed into clear modules. They'll tell you.
I'm going to pause that. You can watch the rest later if you'd like. I also want to acknowledge something. YouTube is playing with me right now because those captions had capitals and periods a couple of days ago. So I need to look into that. And it's funny because I got a message from someone yesterday who said that happened to their video too. So I think it flipped over to the auto track and not the edited version of the captions. So this is my Liquid syllabus. You'll see that I'm laying out how the course works. I'm very clear that there are no Zoom meetings. There is no required textbook. I want to answer all those questions as much as I can. I want to provide my commitment to my students. This is something you'll learn about later, the wisdom wall, but this is a video of my students giving advice, past students giving advice for future students. So when you listen to this, they're going to hear things that affirm my promises. They're going to hear from my past students that I'm there for them, that I'm responsive, the things that I say, which is another way to build trust. My teaching philosophy is here. I have a series of brief videos that I call Let's Get Real. This one is how is Cioppino like our class? And I show myself making Cioppino and all the diverse ingredients in it and how it's the diversity of the ingredients that makes it so delicious. So I make that analogy to the diversity in our classroom. Again, sending cues to acknowledge that diversity is valued. This is my pact, what you can expect from me and what I will expect from you. Having a pact like this is showing that this is going to be a two-way street. It sends that cue that I'm in it with you. And that while I do expect certain things of you, you can hold me to these other things. And the last item in both lists is, do you have anything that you'd like to add to this? When my students come into our course, they actually are given the opportunity to add to this. I'm also noticing something else right now, which is a mistake that I made on my part. I took a screenshot yesterday of this liquid syllabus to show you what the liquid syllabus looks like after the course starts. So right now there are all of these other pages, but I'm going to show you, this is actually a good demo. I'm going to click on the pencil icon and go into the edit mode. This is what it looks like in edit mode. And I'm going to go over on the right where it says pages. These are all my pages that show in the menu. I'm going to go down to, whoops. Are you folks seeing those pages in the menu? Something weird is happening here. You are. Why is that showing navigation? Oh, you know why? Okay. Boy, I'm really making it tricky for you all right now. I did turn them off yesterday. This is how you turn pages on in the navigation or turn them off. You're learning from my mistakes. So right now, it shouldn't show, but the reason it is showing is because I forgot to publish my changes. So I'm going to click publish and then publish again. And let's do a little test. I'm going to go over to that view published site and you can refresh your page. And now do you see how those pages are not showing? Yeah. So that's part of having a website, is that you can actually consider it dynamic content, which is different from something like a PDF or a Word doc, right? You control what's on it as long as you remember to click publish. So in other words, let me explain this again. When my students get my liquid syllabus before the class starts, they're not being sent a data dump. I'm not sending them 5 pages of information. I'm sending them 1 page that demystifies the class for them, that sends cues of me being a partner, that gives them a success plan for week 1, that tells them what to do to be successful. It has the due dates, and I have my tips for success. So that's all they get before the class starts. And then after the class begins, I publish those other pages and I refer to it as their syllabus. I'm going to toggle back over to our slides here. Again, this slide illustrates that. And that shows you how to show or hide a page. Just remember to click publish, and you have to click publish twice. And then in Canvas, this is what my home page looks like before the class starts. Well before the class starts, I publish the course and I only make the home page available in Canvas. So if students come trickling into the class that way, they get a link to the liquid syllabus and they get the QR code, but I also send it out a week in advance to all my students through email. So this shows how to create that QR code. Some of you had that question again. Please use the slides. They are a resource to you. And this has a learning pack you're welcome to use. These are just some slides for you to learn from. What I'd like to do right now, folks, is show you how to get started with a liquid syllabus. And before we do that, well, let me show you just real quickly how to get started, and then we'll, Helen, what should we do? Should we give folks the option now?
I
think
do you want to
maybe.
answer some questions first, or do you want to get them started with?
You know what? I'd rather actually hold the questions because I'm a little worried about time right now.
Yeah.
So I'd like to get folks into the space that you want to either work on your liquid syllabus or to talk to peers if you're already using a liquid syllabus. So I'm going to suggest that, Helen, you put that Zoom chat, the Zoom link in the chat room, and let me be very clear about this. If you are new to a liquid syllabus and want to stay with us to get started on one, I want you to stay right where you are. If you have one, and you want to talk to some of your peers about how they're using it or share what you're doing, I want you to click the link that Helen just put in the chat. It's titled Liquid Syllabus Chat Room, and you can go ahead and join that room. Helen's going to go with you, and then we're going to come back here in about 20 minutes or so. Okay, so about 11:40, 11:45, Helen, I'll let you know exactly. So I'm going to just go ahead and keep going now that you have that option. And I have some steps here for you about how to get started, but I just want to show you briefly. Oops, I'm going to go to sites.google.com. Now I'm already logged into my account, but if you aren't, it'll prompt you to log into your Google account, or you can click create account if you don't have one. Once you're on this slide, at the top, there's a prompt to start a new site. You're going to find a bunch of existing options, which if you want to try out, you can. When I use a template, I most always start, Helen, are you still here? Stacy, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Can you address Maria's question?
Okay, sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Amelia. Okay. When I start with a template, I almost always change it and just start from nothing. So I like to start with nothing. And that's what I'm going to show you. I'm going to click on blank, and it's going to create your Google site. It's going to take you into edit mode. Okay. Only you have access to edit mode. And from here, I can title my file. The title is something that only I see. So I could say history, a photo. Actually, it might show. Yeah, it actually shows right here. And I'll say history of still photography. I can just type in here. If I want to make that a little smaller, I can change my font. Hopefully this looks familiar to you if you've worked in something like Canvas and created content. I can click down below in that space under the title, and this little circle pops up. And if I click on text, it's going to create another text box below, and I can put the name of my college and my name. And I can even click on those three dots and then choose to change the alignment to centered. So there I have a header, but let's make it look better. I can select change image, and I can either upload an image from my computer, or I can go to select image and choose one from the gallery. So I'm going to choose this one here. And there I've got my header. Now down below, I'm just going to add a text section by double clicking and selecting text. Now I'm going to make this section, this be a header that says welcome. So I'm going to change this to a heading, and headings are for accessibility, but they also help anyone with the visual organization of a site. It's what makes certain text pop out and be bigger. So I'll type welcome. And I can also click on that palette there on the left where it says section background and choose the built-in emphasis color, or I can select an image by going down to image and select image. So I'm going to pick something that kind of contrasts with that blue. I'll select that one. And then down below, I'll double click again and add a text box, and I can start writing my note. Okay, so I would write here, I would sign my name, and I can drag that over to the right. And then in this space, using the insert panel, actually I'm lying. I can double click and then choose upload if I wanted to upload a picture of myself. This is probably not the best picture of me. And If I wanted to add a video, that's where I would use the panel over on the right. If you have a video, you'd go to insert and then choose YouTube and put in the link to your video, click search, and then select your video, assuming that it is on YouTube. So I'm going to give you the task to create a blank site, set up your header or your heading at the top, add a heading section with a colored background or an image, and then a welcome section with either an image of you or a video. And I have those instructions laid out on this slide. So I'm going to let you work now, and I'm going to be quiet for the next 12 minutes or so and let you work, okay? And if you're on a steep learning curve, I want to acknowledge that this may not be the best environment for you. So maybe you're just going to get to log in and create your site, play around with it, okay? You can embed the video, Jeanette, by using that embed YouTube option. Sheila, hang in there, take some deep breaths. To answer Veronica's question, you can embed Canvas Studio videos using the HTML embed option. It's right here. On the right, you click on embed and you would put in your embed code right here and it will work. The formatting is a little wonky, so you have to play with it, but it will work. So to add that bar, Tony, I just double clicked, selected text, and then to make it red, you click on the section background and select image. And I don't remember exactly which one I picked, but here's one. And I put my words in there and I changed it to heading. I'm going to stop sharing right now. Actually, I am not going to stop sharing because I just realized that you can't see the instructions. So I'm going to go ahead and start talking again in just a minute, folks. I've been trying to respond feverishly to questions in the Q&A and some in chat. And I'm just checking in with Helen very quickly to see how things are going in the other Zoom. Okay, so as you might imagine, right now there are lots of questions. So I've tried really hard to respond to some of them in the Q&A. I want to share a fabulous resource with you that I'm also going to add to my slides when we're done here, okay? Many people have asked, do you have a video that shows what you just did? We have a self-paced Canvas course that has lots of examples of liquid syllabi, and it has pages that'll walk you through every step of creating one. So I'm going to put that link in the chat. And I encourage you to open that on your end. Again, I'll create a slide for it. I'm going to make a note right now. So if you have my slides, you will also have access to that course on the slides later after we're done. I encourage you to open those up on your side if you haven't yet. But at this time, here's what I'm going to do. We have a couple of questions that I want to address. One question that's come up more than one time is, what do I do with multiple courses? Do I create a site for every course? Or can I create a single site with links to kind of build the courses into that site as pages? You can do either of those things. Honestly, I teach one class right now, so I have one Google site. And I think that it may also depend on your institution. I recommend checking in with your institution. Someone asked, does this fulfill the institutional requirement for a syllabus? That's a local decision that every college is going to answer differently. So that is something that you will need to ask. I have heard from some faculty that institutions do require a printout. So if you do have a liquid syllabus, I know it's an extra step, I acknowledge that, but you can copy and paste pretty darn quickly into a document. And that's something that I do, and I do make that available to my students as a printable option. I've never surveyed them. I wish I could see like how many people actually print it. But that is an option, and universal design for learning, the more options we can provide, the better. Of course, that does put an extra tax on you to have to do that. Yeah, so Tony is saying that Tony's department says they need a record of every semester's liquid syllabus. So let me tell you a little something. I don't know if anyone here, Michelle from Sierra College, are you still here? Sierra College is an institution that has really advocated for their policies, their administration to shift on their policies around a syllabus. Hi, Michelle Coder. And I don't know if you maybe not even know this, I don't know. But I have on good authority that Sierra College has negotiated to have a link be accepted as long as in the URL of that link to your liquid syllabus, it actually says the semester. So making a copy of a liquid syllabus is really easy, and I can show you how to do that. So in other words, at the start of a new term, you'd make a new copy, you'd change the title to put the term title in there, make your changes and publish it, and then you can submit that link. So, you know, folks, again, if equity is our focus, which it is at Sierra College, and I know that Sierra is incredibly committed to equity, I admire the work that's being done there, asking ourselves why we have policies and if it's what's best for our students. Does it make more sense to have something that renders on a mobile device for our students, or does it make more sense for us to have a document? And those are questions that we need to have, and they're hard questions. But as faculty, you are part of those conversations. So let me share my screen and show you how to make a copy of a site. Let me go back to my. Give me a second here. My site. Okay, so I'm going to go into edit mode. So let's say it's the start of a new term. I can go, let me see, it's been a while since I've done this. Click on the 3 dots and select duplicate site. And it's going to call it copy. So I could call this, for example, I'm going to leave the word copy in front of it so I know that it's a demo thing. And I'll just put like spring 2022 and duplicate it. And let me show you how to find your site if you're new to Google Drive. I'm going to go to drive.google.com. If you don't know what Drive is, it's like the closet where all of your Google stuff lives that you've created. Okay, so if I go down here, see how it just shows it right there because it's suggested it's something new. I can click on recent and it's going to show you all of my recent stuff. So there's my copy. There's my other Liquid syllabus, right? Because I was just looking at it. And there it is. So then I can change this as I need. And when I'm ready, I would publish it again. Yeah, so that's how you make a copy of a site. But those are local discussions that really vary from campus to campus. So Dawn is asking, is it public for everyone to see once the site is published, or do students want a link? Do students need a link to access? So it's a website, just like any website. Students are going to need a link to it to access it. Absolutely. So it needs to be published. And if you click on this right here, the little person, do you see how it shows it's restricted? Only people added can open with this link. It's really important that you change the sharing. If it starts with restricted, click on change. And the published site, you want it to be public. So test that out on your own and then click done. I'm going to show you that again. You want to click on the little person at the top that allows you to share with others. It's going to tell you down here the links. If you click on, and yours might look different because you might be using an institutional Google account, which would make things look different. But if I click down here on change, it shows me that my draft is restricted, which means is good. Only I can edit it. You don't want to set your draft to public because then when you give your link to your students, they'll be able to edit it. Not a good idea. Published site is set to public. Anyone on the internet can find and open. So that's what you want to see there. I'm going to now let some voices into this conversation. I'm tired of listening to myself talk, and I do want to acknowledge that there are a lot of questions I haven't gotten to, but I think it's helpful to hear people. So if you have a question that you'd like to ask, Helen, can you enable the raise hand feature? And I'm going to see if we can answer a question if someone wants to speak. How do you see your Liquid syllabus? You're going to go to your published link. While we're waiting, if we have any hands going up, I'll let you know and just call on you in 1 second. I'm keeping my eyes on the hands. To answer that question, let me go back to this version. See that publish button? Once you see a drop down arrow there, it means that the site's been published. And you click on that arrow and then you go to view published site. So you have to publish the site the first time, and that's when you name it. And then you go click on that arrow and go to view published site. And then this is the URL you give to your students. Alicia, this link for this archive will be placed on the website, so you can directly access it on your own, and we will email you the link to the website. So the website will be emailed to you, and Helen just put it in the chat there, and that's where you'll find the archive next week. So I'm not seeing, am I missing hands? Maybe I am, because I'm not looking in the right spot. I do see hands.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Helen. There are the hands. Clarissa, you are first. Would you like, I think you should be able to unmute, or no, I need to give you permission. Allowed to talk. There we go.
Oh, hello. This is
Oh,
so wonderful. I believe I saw you. You did this probably a couple of months ago. And it's amazing and it's wonderful because your students get a chance to connect with you prior to the course starting. Now, I wanted to know, is there a format or guideline as far as the length of a syllabus? How long should it be? 5 slides? 4 or
well,
5?
there's no slides with the site. It's like a web page, right? So,
Right, yeah.
so your question is maybe how many pages should it be?
How many pages? Yeah, that's what I meant. Sorry.
Here's your answer. The shorter, the better.
Okay.
That's your answer.
Okay.
So that's not for me to say how many pages your syllabus should be. I think that what's important is that you look at the content in that syllabus and ask yourselves, do students really need this? And also, does it have everything in there that your institution requires?
So essentially, this is a web page. You're translating your syllabus, your written syllabus in a Microsoft or Word doc, and you're putting it into a liquid form. Right,
with transformations, right? So thinking about the language, is it welcoming? Do you
Right,
have the human
right.
cues, right? The video, which is really encouraged, or at least a picture of yourself that's warm and friendly. So that transformation and accessibility is a big part too. And so, yes, that is what we're doing, but I really want to underscore that when you're sending it to your students before the term starts, which is what this humanizing pre-course contact is all about, you're not sending them everything, because that is really
Okay.
undermining our intentions here. We don't want to overwhelm them by
Right.
saying, hey, here's a 6-page site that you need to read before the class starts. It's more about, I'm here for you. Here's who I am. I want to welcome you. And by the way, I'm going to tell you how to be successful next week. Here are some tips. Here are some suggestions, and really sending those cues of inclusion.
And the other thing is, as far as the animation is like the PowerPoint, are you able to kind of bring stuff in, or is that not?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean.
Like
Are
the
you asking?
PowerPoints that things fly in, pictures,
No. Yeah, there aren't any animations on a site.
Okay.
Animations can be tricky for accessibility purposes.
Okay.
There are a lot of people who get very kind of distracted, and so yeah, but you can put video in a site, but to my knowledge, there are no animations.
And also for ADA accessibility and all that, is there a way that you could screen this first prior to publishing it to make sure that it complies?
The wave
There
tool.
are accessibility tools. Yeah, Helen, go ahead, go for it.
I was just going to say the wave tool. If you Google WAVE, it's a WebAIM product, and it's an accessibility checker for HTML.
Great.
Yeah, Michelle, I haven't tried Grackle, but that's a good one, because I know that is an option for docs. Thank you for your questions. I'm going to go to our next.
Thank you.
Let's see, Tracy, you have your hand up.
Hey, thanks. How do I color or change that color? I can only see the purple for the banner, and then also I can't figure out how to change the colors of the text either.
Are you talking about, would this be this blue background area be the same as the color you're referring to?
Yeah, earlier you had made like a pink color somewhere, but yeah, that would be fine too.
So if I were to click on this little section background. It's the palette icon. I know it's hard to see, but it's to the left in the left column, there's a palette, like a painter palette, an icon for a painter palette, and it's the icon for section background. And if I click there, it allows me to go to image and then select image. And
Okay,
that's
see, I
where
got
you
it.
have the gallery. And I think that's what I did earlier.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah,
Okay, and then can you change the text colors?
you can actually, by highlighting the text. Be careful with colors. Be careful with colors. I like to use colors. I use white text on a dark background or black text on a white background, because that's when we start getting to all kinds of accessibility barriers. But if you click on more, let's see, is it? No, it's text color right here.
Oh, okay. Geez, it was right there. Of course it was. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I want to reiterate, a little while ago, I shared a link to, I want to show this actually, because it might be helpful to share it so you know what I'm giving you. This is a resource that we created for a previous humanizing event. It's put together as a Canvas course. It's public, so there's no enrollment. It's basically like just a public website. And I'm going to give you the link, but if you go over to modules, you're going to find a page with examples. So there's lots of examples here. Down here are some multi-course examples. So earlier someone asked about, like, what if I want to have multiple courses on one site? So you can look at those examples. And then if you go to the next page in that module, it's going to start walking you through the steps. So this is a wonderful, helpful resource if you need some extra help getting started. And the other benefit of using this resource is that it will actually bake accessibility into your creation process. So it'll walk you through what you need to do. Okay, so here is the link. There are some videos in it. Whoops, that's not the right link. Hold on a second.
Is it 66771, Michelle? I have it.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, there we go. Okay, yeah, so that's, and I'm going to add that to my slides after we're done here. So the link will be there as well. Okay. So we are about out of time. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to stop recording.